Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, my guest today is Pradeep Bhandari. Pradeep is an entrepreneur. He's the founder, CEO, editor in chief of Jan Ki Baat. He's a psephologist. He is an author. Pradeep, Cārvāka podcast में आपका स्वागत है.
नमस्कार, बहुत बहुत अच्छा लगा आपके साथ जुड़कर. धन्यवाद.
So, guys, today's discussion is titled for a very specific reason, and let me give you a background as to why I reached out to Pradeep to talk about it. So आज का जो हमारी चर्चा है उसका मैंने टाइटल रखा था द स्टेट ऑफ सेफोलॉजी इन इंडिया. अब मैं मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव दे रहा हूँ एंड इससे क्या होगा कि प्रदीप को भी समझ पड़ेगा कि मैं ये क्यों करना चाहता था. सो वी आर ऑल political followers. We look at politics, we look at psephology, we look at surveys, data, election results, exit polls, all of that. एंड ऑफ लेट देयर इज दिस परसेप्शन, एक परसेप्शन बनी हुई है हमारे देश में कि यार सेफोलॉजिस्ट हर टाइम गलत होते हैं. और इससे क्या हो रहा है कि एक इशू बनते जा रहा है. तो आई रीच्ड आउट टू प्रदीप. मैंने प्रदीप को कहा कि यार ये एक परसेप्शन है और आप सेफोलॉजिस्ट हो, तो जैसे बोलते हैं आपके बिरादरी वालों का नाम खराब हो रहा है, तो भैया पॉडकास्ट पे आओ और समझाओ. सो प्रदीप, लेट्स फर्स्ट स्टार्ट विद दिस. तो अगर सेफोलॉजी क्या है, लेट अस अज्यूम कि जो ये सुन रहे हैं उनको नहीं पता है सेफोलॉजी क्या है, तो पहले हम वहां से चालू करते हैं कि सेफोलॉजी क्या है और उसका लक्ष्य क्या होता है.
कुशल, आपने काफी अच्छा सवाल पूछा और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपके पॉडकास्ट में आने का मौका दिया. देखिए, सेफोलॉजी सिंपल भाषा में अगर दर्शकों को समझाऊं तो चुनावों का आकलन करना सेफोलॉजी होता है. और अगर इसके वाइडर सेंस में अगर मैं कहूं तो किसी भी इवेंट का प्रोबेबिलिटी बेस्ड एनालिसिस करना सेफोलॉजी होता है. तो अगर हिंदुस्तान के अंदर इसको इस तरीके से देखा जाता है कि कौन सी पार्टी जीत रही है, कौन सी पार्टी हार रही है, उसको कितनी सीटें आएगी, क्या वोट शेयर आएगा, वो सेफोलॉजी होता है. अगर वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य में आप देखेंगे तो जनरली बाहर जो सेफोलॉजिकल एनालिसिस होता है वो वोट शेयर प्रेडिक्शंस के अराउंड ज्यादातर होता है कि और वो प्रोबेबिलिटी प्रेडिक्शंस के अराउंड ज्यादातर होता है. क्योंकि कोई भी चुनाव या कोई भी घटनाक्रम होता है, पर्टिकुलरली एक वोटिंग इवेंट जो होता है वो बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स के साथ में इन्फ्लुएंस होता है, और पर्टिकुलरली हिंदुस्तान के अंदर. सो टू पुट इट इन नटशेल, सेफोलॉजी इज द आर्ट ऑफ प्रेडिक्टिंग इलेक्शन, नॉट जस्ट द साइंस ऑफ प्रेडिक्टिंग इलेक्शंस.
So if I was to ask you then as a follow-up, all right, so we are talking about an art of predicting elections, but there has to be a baseline, right? Pradeep, कोई baseline होगी, एक मॉडल होगा, उसके पीछे एक certain working parameters होंगे. तो वो क्या होते हैं जब आप सेफोलॉजी करते हैं? तो
Kushal, unfortunately, in a very the state of psephology in India, which you pointed out, I completely agree with you कि इतने सर्वे लोग लेके आते हैं, इतने जाते हैं, और कौन सही होता है कौन गलत, that is a secondary thing. But there is a very big lack of transparency of people who predict elections in India, and they've made it like a satta तुक्केबाजी. Okay, so it's like कि भैया मैंने अपने नंबर डाल दिए ट्विटर पे, कोई व्यक्ति आ गया टीवी पे, उसने बोल दिया इतनी सीट आ रही है, उतनी सीट आ रही है, टोटल या वोट शेयर आ रहा है. That's not just सेफोलॉजी, right? It's also the analysis, the data modeling which has gone, and you cannot. It's very simple for me. See, I have been in this from 2017, and I have been a follower of Indian politics since my debating days in my school, college, across. And I have traveled across the country, more than 400 constituencies. And I believe that the you cannot understand the voting behavior by just sitting in a AC room and just modulating data as it is, right? You also have to understand there are a lot of layers of human emotions, there are a lot of variables to it, and those can only be respected when you are on the ground. And apart from being on the ground, the first job that has to happen is that a psephologist has to be transparent, which means that if a psephologist is saying that in week 1 the Congress party is winning the election, the psephologist has to back it by saying what makes him think so. What are the seats the Congress party is winning? How is it possible that you are predicting 150 seats for a political party and you are not able to tell the prediction of 5 seats on a political party, right? Now, if that is so, which means that there is a huge lack of transparency, and that is my biggest issue. So it's like if there are many people in the market, many people put their tweet, somebody get it correct sometimes, someone gets it wrong sometimes, but the art and the science of it is completely, nobody goes behind that. So if you get it wrong, there will be reasons when you get it wrong, and you have to explain the reasons when you get it wrong. And when you get it right, there are reasons that you get it right. And more than getting it right and wrong, Kushal, I think there is a huge lack of transparency, because I see in week one, psephologists, when they particularly, I have seen this in even in opinion and exit polls, that in, say for example, in opinion poll, in week one, people say that a political party A is winning. In week three, then they say a political party B is winning, and they just randomly TV channels put out numbers without even telling 10% of the seats which are swinging. So say for example, I'll give you an instance. When the Rajasthan elections 2018 happened, I had seen that many surveyors had said that Congress will get more than 150 seats, 160 seats, 170 seats, and it's a sweep across in opinion polls. Now, these surveyors then, the same surveyors in the third week in the next opinion poll ended up giving BJP a complete majority. So from ending up giving BJP, Congress a complete majority, they went up and gave BJP a complete majority. And I have no issues with that. But the point is, you need to tell what changed, right? What are the seats which change? What are the parameters which change? So that's why when I have done, whenever I do my psephological analysis, and I make it a point that I put on the certain seats, I put on all the possible seats which I can, and even if there is a change in prediction, I tell this is what has changed. Another point why people have lost a lot of faith in certain psephologists is because in India there is a tendency of of predicting the extreme, quote unquote, which means there are certain people and certain agencies which, as per certain markets in Rajasthan and certain Phalodis and all, thought ki bhai, whenever there is a, let's predict extreme. So for example, there were agencies which predicted a massive sweep for the NDA in 2019. Well and good, it was a complete one-way verdict. But then the same agencies applied the same logic in, say, a Bihar election 2020, and they gave 190, 200 to RJD, which was never on the ground, right? So they apply this philosophy of extreme. Chalo extreme hai, ek extreme hamara sahi ho jayega, to logo ko to wahi yaad rahega, right? So this is another problem, and people don't ask. The issue in India is that people don't ask how have you arrived at a number. They don't grill a psephologist. So for example, when I'm on there or whenever I do it, there are certain instances where I may I've also missed it, but I say that these are the reasons which I have gone wrong, or I apologize. But people who go right, they dance rather than telling why they've gone right, or they do not tell why they've gone right or wrong. This is my biggest issue, because there is a huge lack of transparency, and everybody talks about data sample. Nobody has given even 5% of their data sample on air, or no one has been able to show who's on air. So that is, these are the issues which the Indian philosophical system faces right now. And a real psephological analysis, Kushal, is when you get correct vote share predictions. So for example, in this current UP elections, I will give you. So these are things. So academically, if you look at it, it's not possible in an election, in a bipolar election in Uttar Pradesh, that a political party can get 300 seats at 42, 43, 44% vote share. It's not conceptually possible. In data-wise, it is not possible. But when you saw a lot of exit polls, the exit polls went ahead and give the BJP a range from 40% vote share to 46% vote share. And in that, they were converting 300 seats. First of all, a 6% vote share, 40 and 46 is like day and night. There is a huge difference, right? That is number one. Number two, even those who are giving, 290, 300, 285, 300 seats at 42%, it's conceptually completely wrong. But even after that, they did not tell and care that what made them convert 42%, 300 seats at 42%. Because in 2017 assembly elections, because it was a tripolar contest, so in 39% vote share, the BJP ended up getting 300 plus seats. Whereas in 2019 election Lok Sabha, BJP was around 49 point something vote share. And there also, in 49% vote share, because it was virtually a bipolar contest, the BJP could not touch 300. It was somewhere in 270s, 280s. So I was, at this time, it was completely unfathomable for me to see as a psephologist that the BJP was not getting 49. B, those who are saying that the BJP is getting 300 plus, they were not converting 300 plus at 50% vote share. They were converting 300 plus at 42% vote share, which is not possible. Which is the basic flaw. But people don't ask those questions and people don't remember. The issue is that because everybody tweets their numbers on Twitter and somebody gets it near them or other, we completely miss the analysis and the logic towards it. So I think these are very big issues, and the essence of the issue is a lack of transparency and lack of understanding of what exactly is psephological analysis. That's what I particularly feel is the biggest issue, academically looking at.
इसमें इशू क्या होता है ना कि प्रदीप, एक तो जनता को भी समझनी पड़ता है. अभी जैसे आपने ये बात बताई कि 42% पे 300 सीटें नहीं आ सकती, 50% पे चलो एक बार मुझे समझ पड़ता है. और दूसरा ये जो आपने रेंज बोला ना, आई डोंट लाइक टेकिंग नेम्स बिकॉज आई फील यू हैव टू रिस्पेक्ट पीपल एंड देयर डिग्निटी. मगर मैंने कई पोलस्टर्स देखे, पोलस्टर्स क्या करते हैं मालूम है, आप अगर प्लस एंड माइनस 1 और 2% की रेंज बोलते हो ना, मुझे समझ पड़ता है. मैंने लोगों को देखा हुआ है बोलते हुए प्लस एंड माइनस 7%, 8% की रेंज. मैं जस्ट एक एग्जांपल देता हूं कि मैंने ग्राउंड में इलेक्शन में काम किया हुआ है. तो अभी जैसे म्युनिसिपल इलेक्शन है, म्युनिसिपल इलेक्शन में लिटरली विन और लॉस का मार्जिन मुंबई जैसी सिटी का 500 वोट का होता है. 500 वोट में तो पता नहीं क्या हो जाए. आप असेंबली में जाओगे वो फ्यू थाउजेंड होता है, और आप पार्लियामेंट्री में जाओगे वो उससे ज्यादा होता है. तो आप, मगर ये समवेयर डाउन द लाइन मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि आम जनता को समझ कैसे पड़ेगा, उसको बेसलाइन ही नहीं है. और मे बी शायद द रीजन आई एम डूइंग दिस पॉडकास्ट टुडे विथ यू इज आई ऑल्सो वांट टू टेक दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी टू मे बी एजुकेट पीपल टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ द मैथ वर्क्स, how sampling is done. Just a simple example, आप जो अपना वो जो base number, see obviously there is going to be a sampling, right, कि हम इतने 1000 लोग या इतने 100 लोगों को हम assess करेंगे, वो assessment के बाद हम उसको extrapolate करेंगे, और वो extrapolation based on Indian caste, creed, religion, gender, etc matrices होंगे, उसके ऊपर करेंगे. मगर can you explain that? Because see what happens is the average person knows nothing, and what happens is we need psephology. It's not like we don't need it. But then when psephologists refuse to tell people how they are doing it, people lose faith in every institution then.
कुशल, मैं आपसे कंप्लीटली सहमत हूँ. देखिए, इसको मैंने करने के लिए, कुशल, जब से मैंने शुरू किया, मैंने तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी वाइज एनालिसिस मैं करता हूँ. मैं किसी भी, मेरा मानना ये है कि चुनावों में अगर एक नेता अगर वोट मांगने के लिए हर जगह घूमता है, तो एक सेफोलॉजिस्ट जब प्रिडिक्ट कर रहा है कि जनता की पल्स क्या है, तो इट्स एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अ सेफोलॉजिस्ट आल्सो टू हैव मैसिव ग्राउंड प्रेजेंस. तो हम लोग के पोल्स इसलिए इतने वायरल होते थे क्योंकि हम लोग सिर्फ ये नहीं बोलते थे कि भैया 250 सीट आ रही है और इतने परसेंटेज वोट शेयर, क्योंकि टेक्निकल भाषा है. मैं ये कहता था, बॉस, मान लो कर्नाटका, वेयर आई रिमेंबर वी वर द ओनली पीपल हु गेव सिंगल लार्जेस्ट पार्टी बीजेपी, और हम लोग ने वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी वाइज किया. तो मैं बोल रहा था मैसूर में इतनी सीटें आ सकती है, इसमें इतनी सीटें आ सकती है, उतनी है, यहाँ पे ये कारण है हारने का, ये कारण है जीतने का, क्योंकि मेरे पास ग्राउंड अप डेटा था. तो मैं तो बिल्कुल सिंपल तरीके से जब भी एक नेता से भी इंटरेक्ट करता हूं, तो यही इंटरेक्शन में चीज होती है, पहली चीज. अब दूसरी चीज जब होती है, जैसे आपको बताऊं, जब बंगाल में मैं गलत हुआ था, राइट, मेरा बंगाल पर्सनली मेरे लिए सबसे बड़ा आउटलायर था डेटा वाइज, हर तरीके से. जब मैंने देखा कि एक एंटी इनकम्बेंसी का सेंटिमेंट कन्वर्ट नहीं हो पाया और 2/3 मेजोरिटी, पहला ऐसा इलेक्शन मैंने देखा जहां चीफ मिनिस्टर 2/3 में खुद अपनी सीट को हार जाती है और 2/3 मेजोरिटी से वन वे वो इलेक्शन को जीत जाती है. और मेरा मॉडल हार को प्रिडिक्ट कर गया चीफ मिनिस्टर की, और उसकी 2/3 जीत को नहीं प्रिडिक्ट कर पाया. सो दैट वाज अ वेरी बिग शॉकर फॉर मी, एंड दैट इज व्हेन आई रियलाइज कि बॉस, एट सम टाइम एवरीथिंग यू डू करेक्ट, स्टिल यू कैन गो रॉन्ग. एंड फिर वही मैंने सोचा, ऐसा तो नहीं मेरा मॉडल खराब है, बट आई अप्लाइड द मॉडल एंड हियर आई गॉट ऑल ऑफ दीस इलेक्शंस करेक्ट. सो कई बार क्या होता है, कुछ ऐसे फैक्टर्स होते हैं जो आप नहीं कर सकते. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल बंगाल के अंदर 2019 में हमने वही मॉडल को लगाया और बैंग ऑन 18 सीट हमने बोला, 18 सीट बीजेपी लेके आई. हमने उसी मॉडल को लगाया नंदीग्राम में और चिल्ला चिल्ला के बोला, मैंने अकेले बोला ओपिनियन पोल में ममता बनर्जी विल लूज, बिकॉज आई वाज सीइंग दैट इन बूथ्स वेयर ममता हैज टू बी स्ट्रांग, शी वाज गेटिंग फाइट फ्रॉम शुवेंदु अधिकारी. Booths where Shubhendu had to be strong, he is getting a 60% lead there. So whatever be the scenario, and the voting also happened in that way. So I was clear कि भैया 3,500-4,000 से जीत जाएगी. But across the state of Bengal, our sample was showing anti-incumbency, but it did not translate. So in retrospect, we had a lot of reasons to it, but that was an outlier. So नाउ अब आपने पूछा कि ये किस तरीके से इसको आप रेंज की आपने बात की कुशल, मेरे हिसाब से वोट शेयर में बड़ी रेंज नहीं हो सकती। जैसे वोट शेयर क्या हो सकता है, 40 से 42 मान लो आप कहो तो एक चीज रिप्रेजेंट करता है 40 टू 43, पर 40 इज नॉट सेम एज 46। और सीट्स के अंदर भी एक्चुअली क्या होता है, मैं तो जैसे आपको एग्जांपल देता हूँ मध्य प्रदेश चुनाव का। अब मध्य प्रदेश चुनाव में 15 सीटें थी, जैसे मैंने बोला था नेक एंड नेक इलेक्शन है, 15 सीटें जो है वो 2000 से कम की मार्जिन में होगी। तो आपको याद होगा करीबन 14-15 सीट थी जो 800-900 वोट से डिसाइड हुई है, और उस वक्त पेपर की हेडलाइन काउंटिंग भी रात के आखिरी अंधेरे तक चली थी। तो ऐसी सीटों को तो कोई भी प्रिडिक्ट नहीं कर सकता। और अगर कभी उसमें आपको उसमें एक एवरेज आउट करके चलना पड़ता है कि बहुत 60 अगर मेजोरिटी सीट अगर इसमें से ये पार्टी लेगी तो ये आउटकम होगा, ये पार्टी लेगी तो ये आउटकम होगा, तभी 20-25 सीट का तो आपको रेंज देना पड़ता है। सो मेरा ये मानना है कि इट डिपेंड्स फ्रॉम इलेक्शन टू इलेक्शन। जैसे कोई वेव इलेक्शन है, लेट्स से 2019 वाज अ वेव इलेक्शन। अब मेरे को क्लियर था कि बॉस ये सब जगह पे चीजें तो ओपिनियन पोल इज द टफेस्ट टू प्रिडिक्ट अकॉर्डिंग टू मी, एंड वी हैव बीन मास्टर्ड इन ओपिनियन पोल बिकॉज चुनाव के पहले इतने सारे फैक्टर्स होते हैं, क्या चीजें चेंज हो जाए। सो आई सेड इट इन मार्च कि आई एम सीइंग अ कंप्लीट एनडीए कमिंग बैक विद 300 प्लस। नाउ नोबडी वुड हैव थॉट, जो भी चीज कहें कि इवन से इन तेलंगाना एनडीए को डू वेरी वेल। सो इवन दो पीपल हु हैड प्रेडिक्टेड 330, they did not predict 330 by Bengal, UP, correct. When you go to the state-wise number, you will see 70% of their states that went wrong. But I told you कि भैया लोग जब होता है एक्सट्रीम पे खेलते हैं, पर वही जब एक्सट्रीम लगाया उन्होंने बिहार में बोला कि भाई आरजेडी दिख रही है आगे है, पर उनने बोला एक्सट्रीम में जाएगी तो 190 गया, विच वाज नॉट ऑन द ग्राउंड। तो इलेक्शंस में माइक्रो सीट वाले फैक्टर्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होते हैं जो नॉन वेव इलेक्शंस होते हैं कुशल, और नॉन वेव इलेक्शंस में आपका ग्राउंड नेटवर्क बहुत काम करता है। सो वो मुझे चीज देता है। तो उसमें आपकी सीट्स जो होती है, कई सीट स्विंग होती है, इफेक्ट होती है, तो उसमें जनता के सामने ये बेहतर बोलने के लिए होता है कि बॉस बीजेपी, उसकी बीजेपी जैसे मान ली बीजेपी या कांग्रेस में से कौन सरकार बना और कौन सी सीट्स है जो कहीं भी स्विंग हो सकती है, एंड दैट यू कैन ओनली सी एट द वोटिंग डे। सो दिस इज मोर क्लियर पिक्चर ऑफ गिविंग इट। Whereas in say for example in a Punjab, right? Now Punjab, since opinion poll, I was saying that I am seeing a complete current for Aam Aadmi Party, और जैसे जैसे इलेक्शन करीब आया, क्योंकि वोटर अपना वोट वेस्ट नहीं करता है, तो उसने पूरा वोट उधर ही डाल दिया, एंड अकालीज वेंट टू सिंगल डिजिट थिंग। So when we said 85, it ended up to 90, but the trend is same. So if your model is correct, Kushal, the Psephology has to give you the right trend. Now trend cannot be wrong, and trend should not be wrong out most of the cases. योर सीट्स 5 ऊपर 5 नीचे डिपेंड्स ऑन कि कौन सी सीट में आपकी ज्यादा मतलब वोटिंग हो गया, कौन सी सीट के माइक्रो फैक्टर्स बढ़ गए, बट ट्रेंड नहीं गलत हो सकता। सो ट्रेंड उत्तर प्रदेश में अगर आप कह रहे हो कि भैया 300 से ज्यादा सीटें हैं तो वो एक लैंडस्लाइड होती है। अगर आप कह रहे हो कि 260, 70, 80 तो 8 से कन्विंसिंग 2/3 विन होती है। और आप 200 कह रहे हो तो आप बोल रहे हो भैया एज आउट विक्ट्री की है, राइट? वो 200, 205 हो, 206 हो, 208 हो, इट डज नॉट रियली मैटर, इट इज द सेम। वैसे ही अगर मान लीजिए कि पंजाब है, पंजाब में अगर आप कह रहे हो कि भाई रो रो के सरकार बना रही थी आम आदमी पार्टी की, लैंडस्लाइड है, अब 80 से ज्यादा कोई भी सीट लैंडस्लाइड होती है। सो द ट्रेंड शुड नॉट बी रॉन्ग इफ योर डेटा इज करेक्ट एंड इफ यू हैव गॉट डेटा फ्रॉम डिफरेंट सीट्स, राइट? बट इफ योर डेटा मॉडलिंग फ्रॉम डिफरेंट सीट्स इज नॉट करेक्ट, देन आपका ट्रेंड मिस हो जाएगा, क्योंकि फिर आप सिर्फ कॉल सेंटर बेसिस पे ही काम कर रहे हो। कैटी, आई डोंट बिलीव इन कैटी मोड, क्योंकि कैटी से आपका वोट शेयर सही आ सकता है, पर कैटी से आप माइक्रो फैक्टर सीट के नहीं ले सकते। अब आपने बोला सैंपल उठाने का, अब इसमें भी अलग होता है कुशल। अब मान लीजिए एक बनारस है, राइट? अब मैं अगर 2019 में बनारस से सैंपल लूं, तो मुझे उतना सैंपल बनारस से लेने का कोई लॉजिक नहीं है जितना से मान लीजिए मुझे कोई दूसरी सीट से लेने का लॉजिक है जहां पे कास्ट कॉम्पोजिशन ऐसा है, जहां पे मान लो नेक एंड नेक फाइट है, जहां पे मार्जिन पिछली बार की कम की है, राइट? सो उधर से मुझे लेने का कोई सेंस नहीं। तो बनारस में मैं हो सकता है 200 लोगों के सैंपल से ही क्लियरली, अगर वो डेमोग्राफिकली वेल स्पेस्ड है चीज है, तो 200 लोगों के सैंपल से मैं क्लियर कर सकता हूँ। कई जगह आपको होगा कि भैया आपको बहुत अग्रेसिव सैंपल लेना पड़ेगा, 2-2 हजार, 3-3 हजार। सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल आई रिमेंबर जब अमेठी में आई हैड प्रिडिक्टेड स्मृति ईरानी विक्ट्री इन एन एग्जिट पोल, आई हैड क्लियरली सेड कि बॉस आई हैड टेकन अ ह्यूज सैंपल, और मैं उसको बार बार ले रहा था क्योंकि इट वाज एन एक्सेप्शन, राइट? बिकॉज जनरली इट डिड नॉट हैपन पहले से। तो कई सीट्स पे इट ऑल्सो डिपेंड्स। तो ऐसा नहीं कह सकते कि आप हर सीट पे एक सैंपल लो या हर जिले में एक सैंपल लो। इट ऑल डिपेंड्स कि सैंपल आपका रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होना चाहिए, मतलब कि आपका सैंपल सिर्फ एक जगह से नहीं होना चाहिए। अगर मान लो मैं अगर दिल्ली में बैठा हूं तो अगर मैंने सिर्फ साउथ दिल्ली का ही पूरा सैंपल ले लिया और उसके बेसिस पे बोल दिया तो इट्स नॉट ऑफ सेंस, इट हैज टू बी ज्योग्राफिकली स्प्रेड आउट। उसमें महिलाओं का भी परसेंटेज इक्वल सिग्निफिकेंट होना चाहिए, और अगर कास्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है तो अलग कास्ट का भी होना चाहिए। सो लार्जली दैट्स व्हाई आई से इट्स एन आर्ट, बिकॉज यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज मेकिंग द वोटर decide the voting outcome, and this is why a lot of behavioral choices matter a lot. तो कई जगह भाई महंगाई की गुस्सा है, पर महंगाई वोटिंग आउटकम ही नहीं है, तो फिर आप उसको क्या उखाड़ के कर लोगे ना, ये चीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है। सो इट डिपेंड्स, यू हैव टू फाइंड आउट व्हाट इज डिसाइडिंग द वोटर्स वोट इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। जैसे बिहार में 2019 में प्योर नेशनलिज्म प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी का था, दो वहीं उत्तर प्रदेश में इट वाज जस्ट नॉट नेशनलिज्म, इट वाज आल्सो वेलफेयरिज्म व्हिच हैड ड्रोव बीजेपी despite an SP-BSP alliance, you know. So these things you can only understand when your sample is diverse and you yourself are also on the ground. So I personally believe that anybody who's predicting an election should spend some time on the ground. It cannot be purely a dispassionate, a distant view of the data. It also has to understand variables, and that can only happen when you are gone on the ground or when your team is on the ground when it is collected data.
Now, this is a point. You said you have to get on the ground and try and understand and collect your samples based on your ground exchanges also. But here's, I'm trying to understand this. Now, where you end up going on the ground also would matter. Also, something that I have noticed, and this is a typical problem, I would say, psephology, while yes, it has a huge mathematical element to it, but it also comes under the banner of social science in many ways, right?
Yes.
Because these are social science issues. Now, Pradeep, the issue with social sciences, whether we like it or not, it's a global trend. Social sciences have been completely dominated by a particular political ideology, which is the left. And there is data in Georgetown University in America. There are multiple studies done in Phoenix, Arizona, done across the world, where it's quite clear that social sciences have a huge left-wing bias. So I'll give you the example of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, right? Everybody and their chacha mama kaka was saying Hillary is coming. And then you should have just seen the expressions of people on CNN, ABC, MSNBC. वो बोलते हैं जैसे कुत्ता काट लिया किसी को जाके बैठ के, उधर उनकी हालत देखने वाली थी, जैसे ये क्या हो गया, हमने तो ऐसे प्रेडिक्ट किया था, ऐसे प्रेडिक्ट किया था. Now, how much of a role, Pradeep, so my question is, how much of a role does the individual's ideology also play, where I might go on the ground, but still if my ideology is pushing me to certain areas, then
very well put. The most difficult task is that you need to hear more. क्या होता है, अधिकतर लोग जो होते हैं वो अपना पहले से ओपिनियन बना लेते हैं, क्योंकि when you spend lot of time reading, when you spend lot of time hearing opinions, when you become very opinionated, then you पहले से सोचते हो ऐसा होगा, और फिर उस बेसिस पे आप अपनी जो कॉन्वर्जेशन सुनते हो ना, उसको भी फिल्टर करते हो. So the biggest challenge, Kushal, is that you have to go with an empty mind to first hear the person out as it is. Now, as you go, it is a very challenging task. पहली चीज, जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल से इफ आई एम गोइंग विथ माई टीम, पर्टिकुलरली आई टेल यू व्हाट आई डू फॉर माई सेल्फ. मैं अब इंडिविजुअली किसी भी ओपिनियन को सोशल मीडिया में लेता ही नहीं हूँ. जैसे मान लो पंजाब हो गया, कोई भी हो गया, मैं हर चीज को जब भी जाता हूँ, जैसे आई एम ऑन द ग्राउंड, देन आई एंश्योर दैट माय नेट इज ऑफ एंड आई एम जस्ट लिसनिंग टू पीपल एज इट इज, राइट. अब वो भी इनफ नहीं है, मैं भी बायस, एवरीबडी इज अ बायस्ड पर्सन. जो बोलता है वो न्यूट्रल है, वो बेवकूफ है. हर व्यक्ति की एक ओपिनियन होती है. So how do you do it? You have to ensure that your model cancels the bias. So if say a person who is right of center, और कोई बच्चा मान लो right of center है, या कोई आइडियोलॉजी की right of center है, वो बोल रहा है कि भाई भाजपा आ रही है, right? I'm giving an example. So I make it a point कि मैं एक ऐसे व्यक्ति से भी उसको चेक कराता हूँ जिसको राजनीति से कोई लेना देना ही नहीं है, जो फ्रेशर है, क्या उसको भी वो दिखता है. अब वही उल्टा, मतलब, और से लेफ्टिस्ट, कोई लेफ्टिस्ट गाय आ गया मेरे उसके अंदर, वो बोलता है कि भाई बीजेपी हार रही है, तो आई मेक इट अ पॉइंट कि भाई दूसरे व्यक्ति से भी चलाओ. सो इट वर्क्स अ लॉट ऑन कुशल कैंसलिंग बायसेस, which is very very important, and you cannot rely on only one feedback loop. So in your model you have to have multiple feedback loop. So कल को कुशल को मैंने बोला भैया कुशल की जिम्मेदारी है, लेट्स से गुजरात इज कमिंग, तो सौराष्ट्र की प्रेडिक्शन कुशल की जिम्मेदारी, उसकी टीम की जिम्मेदारी है. अब कुशल ने मुझे डेटा बोल दिया कि अरे भैया आम आदमी पार्टी बहुत अच्छा कर रही है, आई विल नॉट बाय दैट. I'll ensure that my team, which is say working in North Gujarat, also checks it whether it is happening in Saurashtra, right? So the game is also a lot on cancelling bias, and your field investigators have to be very less biased. And you also, as an individual, it's a very, very challenging task. So you have to differentiate your opinion from the ground opinion. So that takes a lot of time, and it is a huge challenge. So not I personally ensure that your field team has to be very less opinionated. That is number one. And even at time they build opinion, you need to find ways and in your model to cancel the opinion of people. अब होता क्या हिंदुस्तान के अंदर मेजोरिटी सेफोलॉजिस्ट जो होता है अक्कड़ बक्कड़ बम्बे वो टाइप एक कैटी मॉडल चला दिया, एक एक्सेल शीट चला दी, चलो 120 से 30 है, नेक्स्ट वाले में 125 से 35 कर दो, फिर 140 से 45 देखो, कोई ट्रांसपेरेंसी नहीं है ना कुशल. अरे आज मैं सही हो गया, गलत हो गया, कोई ट्रांसपेरेंसी नहीं है. तो द पॉइंट इज पीपल डोंट सी द एफर्ट. तो मैंने हम लोग ने ये करना चालू किया था दैट व्हेनेवर my team used to go, we used to put everything, boss, the team is in Saurashtra, Gujarat, ये so people know the work is happening. But say डेटा कलेक्शन कैसे होता है, मॉडलिंग कैसे होती है, ये सब में ट्रांसपेरेंसी होना बहुत जरूरी है. बट माय एक्सपीरियंस टेल्स मी, एंड माय एक्सपीरियंस नाउ इन 25 इलेक्शंस टेल्स मी, you can't eliminate bias, you have to cancel and limit the bias. And when your bias is extremely limited, then you get it spot on. And when the bias of the team overrides, then you completely miss the trend. So if you have a good model to cancel bias and limit the bias, you will get the psychological trend correctly for sure.
So just a follow-up question इसके लिए प्रदीप, तो क्या one of the things that maybe a person running Psephology of a Psephology firm and an election predicting modular firm would be that they would maybe have to hire people of differing political and social ideology, so that even if their biases are there, I correct for them in the hiring itself then?
No, I think, Kushal, you need to hire honest people. And I personally particularly work with youngsters, right? So say I am a very opinionated guy because I do a daily show, which is a prime time show, it shares, etc. So I'm a very opinionated guy. I have opinions on issues. But when I'm doing an election, I make it a point that I am not personally, I don't, whatever I am getting, say, from one swing of the system, whether left, right, I don't buy anything on I don't take anything at face value, number one. Number two, I distance myself from people for a certain amount of time, because if my surrounding is only having one conversation, then my mind is circled around it. Number three, team, I tend to work with youngsters, because when I work with youngsters, right, who are in their early 20s and all, particularly in predicting, I'm not talking about the management part of election, how to swing it, but art of predicting what the voter is thinking. A young brain is more, is not very rigid. And if you train a young brain, if you tell, there is also a way of asking questions. So when you ask questions, there is a way of asking questions, whether you are asking a specific question or a general question. So if your questionnaire is designed well, and if you have trained your team to understand behaviors properly, then I think the bias is limited. And I particularly work with youngsters because youngsters are more open-minded in terms of predicting elections, and they're more open-minded to different points of view. So that is the one thing which I ensure, because as people age, right, and as people become more experienced, they form opinions and they form rigid opinions. And at times it is very difficult for them to, deviate from their opinion. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a very senior man, and this senior man and I had differing opinion on UP. He was telling, I met him 3 to 4 times, and he was of this opinion that BJP is losing UP, and he had predicted Indira Gandhi's loss also when she had lost her election post-emergency. And he told me that he was the only person who had predicted the loss. But he was not traveling on the ground, and he did not even once went on the ground, had no feedback loop. He threw his model. And I was giving a very contrary opinion, right? I was getting that BJP is true, and my prediction also on the ground was not telling me any anger. In fact, was a pro-incumbency. So here you look at it. The man who predicted it completely correct them, because he had no feedback loop of people on the ground. He himself did not went on the ground. So his own opinion overpowered the other thing, right? So I think it is all about what type of people you work on, and it is also about number two, whether you are yourself on the ground. So I don't judge people's ideology. But when I talk to people, right, even if the person might be ideologically left or right, the bottom line is whether the person is able to accept the reality which is there or not. So say Kushal might be right of center, Pradeep Bhandari might be extreme right of center, but that is secondary. When Pradeep Bhandari sees an Aam Aadmi Party victory in Punjab, the Pradeep Bhandari does not hesitate to accept the reality, right? So whether it is more on attitude of the individual, not that much on the ideology, is what I feel. So that is this is very important.
I'll tell you why I asked you this question. Now, you raised the point about asking specific questions. So let me explain this to you from where I'm coming with a very recent discussion I did with Abhijit Iyer on the World Press Freedom Index. So आपको पता होगा रिसेंटली ये सो कॉल्ड वर्ल्ड प्रेस फ्रीडम इंडेक्स आया जिसमें 150 नंबर की रैंकिंग दी है उन्होंने भारत को। ठीक है जी, भारत के ऊपर दुबई वुबई बहुत सारे विचित्र किस्म के देश हैं, वो भी हमारे ऊपर थे उस रैंकिंग में। तो मैंने रिएक्ट नहीं किया, मैंने अभिजीत को बोला अभी एक काम करते हैं, हम लोग ये क्वेश्चंस पढ़ते हैं। तो हमने उनका पूरा क्वेश्चनर पढ़ा, हमने उनकी पूरी मेथोडोलॉजी पढ़ी। अब ये आपने क्वेश्चन की बात रेज की, इसके लिए मैं लोगों को शायद एक उदाहरण के माध्यम से आपसे प्रश्न पूछ रहा हूं। वो क्वेश्चंस इतने लीडिंग और इतने जनरलाइज थे कि उसका मैं आंसर जैसे मतलब आपको फील क्या हो रहा है, अरे क्या फील हो रहा है, क्या क्या क्वेश्चन है यार, मतलब ये किस किस्म का क्वेश्चन है, कुछ स्पेसिफिसिटी नहीं है। क्योंकि अगर देखिए एट द एंड ऑफ द डे यू आर गिविंग नंबर्स आर हार्ड रियलिटीज। I understand there is a range, but you are trying to predict a hard objective reality. You are giving an objective truth. To get to an objective truth, Pradeep, as far as and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm actually trying to understand your mind more than anything. To understand an objective reality, I assume you will have to ask objective questions, not generalized subjective questions, which are all over the place. So how the hell does see why my faith in surveys go away is when I read rubbish like the World Press Freedom Index. My faith in surveys goes away.
No, I also don't have, Kushal. I'm telling you, I'll tell you what, I fear predicting elections because, you have to do, it's like you have to do everything correct to predict an election, correctly. Everything correct, right? And there is a problem of being a nationalist in India that whenever a nationalist fails, everybody will go after the person, right? And leftists have built this ideology that a fake man like Yogendra Yadav, who's predicted 99% elections, he had predicted wrong in his life. Because I remember interacting with him in a lot of discussions. No logic has been made, artists and all, whatever. So everything you have to do correct to predict an election is what I personally feel. Like even a political party, in order to win an election, has to do everything correctly. One mistake can completely change the narrative because you are dealing with human emotions. You are not just dealing with robots, right? You are dealing with human emotions. Kushal might be my very good friend. Now imagine if I am a public representative and I come to Kushal and tomorrow I slap Kushal's brother. So Kushal might be such a big friend of mine, but still end up, feeling that इसने ऐसा कैसे कर दिया, मेरे against vote कर दिया, So there are many things which go into picture. You can't have a definite answer. For example, Madhya Pradesh, the BJP was on the verge of winning in 2018. But the chief minister said कि कोई माइकल रिजर्वेशन नहीं हटा सकता. That statement became the inflection point, and कई लोगों ने एक बेल्ट में अगेंस्ट वोट डाल दिया. BJP ended up losing 15 and ended up losing 10-15 seats. So number one point is that. Number two, Kushal, you need to understand that what type of questions you ask and in what format you ask is also very important. So say today I ask Kushal, acha Kushal, say I ask a person, acha, for example, ये बीजेपी अच्छी है ना, तो the person will say हाँ अच्छी है. Now that does not define कि भैया he is voting for the person or not, right? That is the most important point. So it has to, and secondly, you need to know that a voter will never open up to a stranger immediately. तो आप चले गए बोला अच्छा ये बताओ बीजेपी को वोट दोगे कांग्रेस को वोट दोगे, टिक टिक टिक, ऐसे भी नहीं चलता है. क्योंकि why will a stranger tell an voting outcome to voter tell a voting outcome to a stranger? वो घर के रिश्तेदार को चीज नहीं बताता. So it is also very important to the way you have designed it. That is extremely important. So for example, in a state like, I'll give you an example. So if I ask, you first ask, generally I go ahead and ask you what is going on, how are things around, and then the person is comfortable, then you come to the specific question that what do you want? There are two things. One is what does the person want and what is the person thinking will happen. So what does the person want is the voting. What the person thinks will happen is not the voting, right? So even a congressee will think कि भाई BJP is coming, but whether the congressee will vote the BJP is the question, or not a loyalist of the Congress, or the other way around. So what matters is, are you able to find out what does the person want, not what the person thinks will happen? Because what the person thinks will happen is just guess, right? So but what does the person want, that data quantification over a period, over different geographies, will give you what will actually happen. So this is very, very important. So yeah, so again I said, it is also not it is just not about asking general questions and specific questions. It's asking the questions in a manner that the voter tells the truth, because you as a surveyor or a psephologist are a stranger to the voter, and generally people don't tell वोटिंग आउटकम्स टू स्ट्रेंजर्स. तभी तो आप देखो उत्तर प्रदेश में महिला जाके वोट कर गई थी सिलेंडर के नाम पे और सब पे बीजेपी पे, और जाके पुरुष को पता भी नहीं चला था, राइट? सो इट इज अबाउट दैट. एंड नंबर टू, ऑल्सो गोल्डन रूल इज कुशल, पीपल डोंट टेल रियल, मतलब now there are many castes, right? So socially dominant castes are very expressive in their opinion, but a non-dominant caste, when it goes against the dominating opinion of the dominating opinion, they will never tell it in group, they will always tell it in private. So suppose in a place you have 45%, 30% Yadav, 10% Muslim, and there are, say, non-Jatav SCs living in the same place which are 25%, but they are socially non-dominant because of historical reasons. They will not tell when the Yadavs are around and Muslims are around that they will vote a Modi. But when you meet them in private, if work has happened, they will tell you. So there are many things which are happening, and I have understood all of this, Kushal, by traveling on the ground, building my model, improving it across geographies. So fortunately, I've got the ability to travel in stay in a state like Tripura for 2 months, even in a state like Karnataka for 2.5, 3 months, in a Bengal for 2 months, and even a Hindi heartland and a Punjab. So when you travel across geographies, you understand that this is the commonality which is there, and you really need to keep updating that also as time progresses, because people, what they think at that time is very, very important. It is not that what people have been thinking since long. That is also, this is a very critical part. I'll give you another example. Somebody who would not have gone on the ground would never be able to tell that majority of the Jats this time were not against the BJP. It was only a belt of Baghpat. So when I went on the ground and my team went on the ground, we saw that, Baghpat, the Jats are behaving differently in Baghpat area, but in Mathura and Agra, they are completely behaving differently, right? So all these things can only happen when you are on the ground and when your team is on the ground, and it has covered immense amount of demography and geography. That is extremely important.
So one more aspect that I wanted to understand from you is, again, from an academic perspective, is at the end of the day, psephology and these predictions and modeling, and like you said, you have to frame good questions, is a lot about trying to understand human psychology. At the end of the day, आप एक human being के behavioral pattern को predict करने जा रहे हो, और उसके लिए आपको उसके दिमाग में क्या चल रहा है ये जानना बहुत जरूरी है, राइट? अगर आपको पता नहीं होगा उसके मस्तिष्क में क्या चल रहा है, तो आपको कैसे पता चलेगा? So if I was to ask you, how much do psephologists, first question would be, do you think psephologists should also be students of psychology and different psychological
Yes.
models, and how many in India actually do that?
See, again, Kushal, I have huge problem with, lack of transparency, because I have seen politics from very close eyes and I've seen it from the voters' point. So I know it's a very challenging job. Winning an election in India is a very challenging job, and predicting an election in India is a very, very challenging job. So I completely feel very sad when I see lack of transparency, and that's why I get detached. For example, there are times that we work for months and months in order to come to numbers, but we see here every hafte, or people come up with numbers, but there is no explanation given to it. So I completely of this opinion that you need to understand how people think, and there is a way to understand the psychology. So it's not just random numbers which are there. Numbers will give you vote shares for sure, but they will not be able to tell you the trend of conversion of psephologically, whether which party is winning, by how much margin the party is winning. pure numbers help you in vote share prediction. That is number one. Number two, but there are certain commonalities which I, as a person, have seen over the years, which have come out. That a people now, India is coming into a trend, Kushal, that whether it is pro incumbency or anti incumbency, there have to be faces which are able to consolidate that. There have to be faces which are able to consolidate that. So, for example, if there is an anti-incumbency, but there is no face to consolidate that anti-incumbency, so there will be less probability, this which I've seen over the period of time, of that anti-incumbency actually translating into vote. Similarly, if there is pro-incumbency and there is no face to translate that pro-incumbency, there's less chances that that pro-incumbency will translate into votes. Number two, people, so it's more faces are becoming more important above parties. Parties provide a baseline. That is something which you see is happening across geographies. Number two, which is also happening across geographies, is that people want to see their public representatives spend time on the ground. So this era of media based politics is completely coming to an end. They want to see that sukh dukh mein neta uske saath mein. So this classic case of Navneet Rana's husband Ravi Rana, if somebody studies that, he's been an independent MLA, and whether governments have come and gone, he is always stuck there because that guy knows the name of every second person in the household. So this is something which is common. So irrespective of certain things, there are certain traits, common traits also, which like, at least now models are telling us that to win an election, there are certain common traits which are bare minimum. Then comes the variable. And also when you lose, there are certain common traits which happen. So these are things which are there. But psychological analysis, again, Kushal, the model can only be built. Like we have built this model over trying it across geographies, right? So you can't expect to provide, suppose there is a model in the United States of America where some professor is provided or some professor is provided and you apply that. It cannot happen. You have to experientially develop it. And that is the only truth. So, and this is, I really believe a lot in experiential knowledge and experience driven thing because it is to do with primary data, right? It's to do with voters. So this is very important. So I'm not in favor of taking any model of, say, United States of America and UK, because that is being tried and built by keeping conditions which are similar to their demography, their way of thinking. A model has to be evolved by, like, we only rely on our model, but psephologists in India have to build models which are tested on this demography, which are tested on India and across geographies. So that is important. That may not completely work in, say, a United States of America. There you have to experientially build a model that suits their condition. So it is, and so there is no definite answer to it. But yes, principally, I completely. That's why I say it's the art of understanding. If it's only the science, then I can set up a data room in New Delhi or Bombay, and I can get the voter list from across the place, and then I can start calling people to ask, right? But because it is also psychological analysis, it matters a lot. So I'll give you a simple example. If I speak to Kushal, I speak to you on phone, there is only a limit to which I can speak on phone. But if you and me meet over a cup of coffee or a tea, there will be 10 things you may know about me more than what you would be knowing on phone. And there'll be 12 things I may know more about you, right? So it cannot be that physical proximity is important. That's why ground presence is extremely important. And this just a small example in analogy.
So do you think a lot of the times when off late, I at least in the last 15, 20 years since I've been following exit polls or poll predictions in India, do you think, look, I don't know how to say this. Like I've heard sometimes people who are prominent psephologists in India making comments on the voters itself. Now, what happens is if you have such nasty comments about voters and their intentions, and you are so obviously showing, now what kind of a psychological model are you going to develop when you think, voters voting for the Bharatiya Janata Party is a dark day for democracy or a dark side of democracy? I mean, so my point is that what do I do if these scholars, right? So if, let's say, they take a psychological model based on a textbook of America where inside the textbook of America, Narendra Modi is a textbook fascist. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying in the textbook of America, Narendra Modi is the textbook fascist. Now, if they were doing a mood of the nation poll, right? Now, in the mood of the nation poll, I'm not even talking about, because see, you guys do a lot of these polls also, na, कि सिर्फ election prediction नहीं करते हो, mood of the nation poll भी करते हो. अब mood of the nation poll आएगा कि working assumption थी Narendra Modi is a fascist, textbook fascist as per American psychological models. Mood of the nation आता है 68% of India likes Modi. Narendra Modi is a fascist. 68% of Indians are fascists. So you see what I'm trying to say here?
See, the prominent scholars and psephologists who've been past, I have been in this. I first used to have huge respect for them, right? But once once I started to interact on debates, I started to follow very deeply, and coincidentally, started to predict elections along with my journalistic work. I completely lost all respect, not because people get it wrong, but because they were all liars. They wanted to impose their opinion on people and, had built those as surveys. I remember during Gujarat, one of these psephologists who was a prominent person from the left was sitting with me on a debate. And I said that the BJP will repeat. He said that he will leave Psephology if the BJP repeats, and there is massive anger in Gujarat and the BJP is losing and Congress is winning hands down. And I asked him, what is the basis of that? Can you name me 10 seats? This discussion was in the leftist TV channel called NDTV. I told him, I will name you all the 180 seats, which you have, and tell me where I'm wrong so that I can check it out. I told him, can you name me 10 seats? He said, this is all these newcomers come and all of it. There's nothing 10 seats. He could not name me 2 seats out of 180. Not even 2 seats out of 180. And he was predicting the entire state. All these people, Kushal, I have seen, they speak good English. They will speak technical things because their substance is very shallow. And we as nationalists in India face a very big problem, which let me be very categorical. They feel that they need appropriation from the so-called leftist and white man's burden, which was prevailing there. This white man burden has to come out from a lot of people in India. You don't need, if your work has substance, and if you have mass following, or if you believe, which is there is no need to get it appropriated from, say, somebody from the other side, right? And that is very, very important, because the other side does not care about you. So even as a scholar or anybody, I have seen that we've really faced this problem ki bhai, if somebody from XYZ will appropriate or write good about it, then only it will be of value. I completely am of a different opinion. I completely am against. I have believed this, that if you are in the if you are a psephologist, your numbers are there, predictions are there, as simple as that. And the more you know your work, the more less technical you will talk. टेक्निकल बहुत ज्यादा भाषा में वही लोग मासेस के सामने बात करते हैं. आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट एकेडमिक्स, बट जनरली जिनको उसको सिंप्लीफाई नहीं करना आता है. Even great people like Steve Jobs or people who've been great in their work, they simplify things because they know because they are clear. ये leftist or these people who have been in the profession, they particularly complicate things. Particularly they complicate things because they know they don't have substance. So when you don't have substance, you give lot of gas, and that is what these people precisely do. I remember there was a time that polls used to happen कि किसी ने चावल, अगर जो व्यक्ति दिन में 2 दिन चावल खाएगा, वो व्यक्ति वोट ऐसे डालेगा, और 2 दिन नहीं खाएगा, वो व्यक्ति ऐसे डोल डालेगा. This is like so foolish. I will give you, this was also a prediction which was done. So my problem has been that because this entire field of social science has been captured by the left, like history, you know how history has been captured. Now when you get scholars who are very good with primary data, right? I am very confident because I get primary data, so I can't be fooled. So tomorrow you give me gas, I'll tell you, boss, you're giving me gas. So somebody like a Vikram Sampath, when people started to give gas on Veer Savarkar, he said, boss, you are talking shit. I have primary documents. I have researched 2 years of my life. So all that narrative went flat. But for years, these people were, peddling that narrative because nobody had come with the scholarly work to go through primary documents. So it's extremely important for you to not build your knowledge or not build your understanding as professionals in any field on secondary document and on secondary sources. If you build on primary documents, primary sources, then you will know what is wrong on the other side, what is correct on the other side. So yes, I completely am of this opinion because I was a great follower of all these psephological aspects, elections. But now when I have done it so minutely, Kushal, and I have personally spent 6.5 years on the ground traveling across every geography. Leave bearing apart Andhra Pradesh, I would have traveled every state and stayed there across a little bit of Tamil Nadu. I can tell you that India really lacks primary data collection in a very, very big way, particularly on elections. And this is why people give gas. And another biggest issue is Kushal, journalists basically do this thing called as election tourism. So they will go with a politician and they will go to a rally, or they will go to a 5-star, they will stay in a 5-star hotel, and then they will travel around and talk to 5 panwalas or 6 panwalas, and then they will predict that this is what is happening. You know, journalistic political reporting is different from data analysis of the election. Data analysis of the election can only be once you have got data from all the geographies. So what you feel कि ऐसा होगा और डेटा क्या कह रहा है और उस पर फिर आपने सिफोलॉजिकल साइकोलॉजिकल है, उसमें बहुत फर्क है. तभी हर व्यक्ति, क्योंकि ओपिनियन है, तो हर तीसरा रिपोर्टर जब ग्राउंड पे जाता है वो बोल देता है भैया मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है, हो रहा है. और क्योंकि हवा हवाई की बात है, वैसे अभी उत्तर प्रदेश में लीजिए, इतने सारे रिपोर्टर्स ने, इतने सारे पत्रकारों ने बोला कि भाई सपा जो है जीत रही है, फुल ऑन जीत रही है, इतने सारे लेके आए उनने चीज करके. कई लोगों ने बोला 350 भी बीजेपी ला रही है. उनमें से किसी ने बाद में ये थोड़ी बोला कि क्या हम गलत हो गए ना. तो भैया फ्री की ओपिनियन है, बांटो बोलो करो. आदमी की ओपिनियन तो शॉर्ट है, पब्लिक मेमोरी इज शॉर्ट, आजकल याद आएगा वापस से शुरू हो जाएंगे करके. और दैट इज व्हाट आई फील इज द थिंग. सो वी लैक serious academic work in India. I completely agree with you. The leftists have been very good because they are good with English, and because the funding all used to happen through NGOs which wanted that narrative spread. Now we are totally indigenization is taking place, and slowly people are taking pride in what they believe. But people on the nationalist side, I feel they should, in order whatever work they do, they should really rely a lot on primary documents, and original thinking is very important. You know, so original thinking in primary documents is something which is a key. And here, I have not seen any. So I sorry to say, first I used to consider people as God. So personally, I might respect them, but professionally, I think there is huge vacuum. And because see, TV is also, you have 2 hours, right? So TV channels also care कि भैया कितनी सीटें आ रही हैं, क्या वोट शेयर आ रहा है, बस. आप समझ रहे हो? तो कोई इसमें थोड़ी आके पूछेगा कि क्यों आ रही है, कैसे आ रही है, क्या हो रहा है ना. तो बट फॉर सीरियस पीपल हु आर सीरियस फॉलोअर्स, आई थिंक a detailed analysis is very important, and primary data collection is very important.
All right, now I'm going to start taking viewers questions because we have a time constraint. So this is a very intelligent question a viewer has asked. The viewer asks, how much does manufacturing consent have an effect on the elections itself? Also, I'll add a little bit to that. Sometimes are opinion polls also used as tools to shift opinions?
200%. Not sometimes, majority of the times. Majority of the times. That's why I say opinion poll is the toughest to predict. So I'll give you the viewer a task. Go ahead and find out these agencies. These agencies had predicted many things in opinion polls. And every week they used to change their opinion poll. Or at times what they predicted in opinion poll was day, and in exit poll they went ahead and predicted night. But they never provided an explanation how did day became night. And also find out in the whole logic that how do opinion polls come up. Week 1 they say X, week 2 they say Y, week 3 they say Z, but they don't tell what has changed. And none of the opinion polls, if they are predicting, let's say 400 seats of UP, 400 odd seats of UP, and they give 250 to BJP. Next they say 260, next they say Sappa 220, but they will not tell you which seats changed in 220 to 250, right? So suppose nobody's done that. Yeah, come on, you need to know, right? If you are changing certain things to certain things, you need to tell what has changed, no? Which thing has shifted where, what has shifted. So yes, I completely agree with this opinion, and I can tell you for sure. This is why this this is why predicting opinion poll is the biggest challenge if you have to do it right. I remember in Rajasthan when we predicted, I got so much of bashing because I was only saying that Congress will not cross 100. And at that time, everybody was saying Congress 140, 150. But because in after the ticket distribution or in Congress, Sachin Pilot and Ashok Gehlot camp, there was no synergy. So there were 20 seats which were always where the Congress people were ensuring that the BJP won. So we were very clear कि हो ही नहीं सकता ऐसे. But I got so much flack, so much flack. Thank God after the election prediction that Congress ended up at 100 seats. But I'm telling you, it's very challenging. On manufacturing consent, yes, and that is where polls go wrong. I will tell you, and this is where things really impact. And at certain times, so this is why, a very decentralized model is also a very big challenge. And this is why I come back to what I said in the first. You need to have things in your model where you can eliminate or reduce the bias. So it's not whether you have put 100 people on the ground or 10 people on the ground. It's whether you are being able to eliminate and limit bias of the people who are on the ground. That is the moot point. Because it happens that if 10 data points come to you, or say 10 voters' opinion come to you, one or two of them will be manufactured consent, for sure, 100%.
Okay, so this question is more, I think it's from a techie. So how useful are tools like machine or deep learning in building better models and more accurate predictions, or are psephologists already using them?
Well, I think they will be very, very useful. I'll tell you how. Say, for example, there are certain constituencies, Kushal, which which take a lot of time to swing. So, for example, I'll tell you an example. If tomorrow in Banaras, now it's clear that Prime Minister is a very strong. Now, tomorrow, if suppose your data point or machine or deep learning is able to establish that these are the only, these 4 elections you have done, or in these 4 elections, these areas are only the areas where swing has taken place. Everything else has remained constant. So your effort will get really minimized on the ground. But the issue is, for deep learning and machine learning to take place and happen, it requires good amount of, financial resources. And right now, psephology as a profession is not a very lucrative profession like it's in the United States till a political party commissions a survey, right? So if they say a political party also commissions a survey to any psephologist or say an agency or anything else, there is some amount of lucration. But we have not evolved where deep learning and machine learning will be built in. Everybody speaks about it, but honestly, it has not evolved to an extent where you can really target your efforts and micromanage your efforts. So, for example, ideally, machine learning should be used that in Uttar Pradesh, let's say these are the areas that have been voting since 2014 in a particular manner. These are the areas which are being swinging, moving. So you will put your more efforts to the swinging and the moving areas or the booths, right? So you need a lot of effort, and I think it's a very good opportunity for people who are interested in deep learning and machine learning and data analysis to build that. Ultimately, if you are able to map certain things and map outcomes, then you will be left with less variables to focus on. So it can limit your variables, but it cannot still eliminate the groundwork.
So this is a very interesting question. So it's based on the underlying assumption that opinion polls there is a claim that opinion polls tend to affect voting behavior. Now they are asking the question, does they or do they not? Now I'll use
Voters are foolish, Kushal, that they will only be choosing कि भाई opinion poll में दिखा दिया भाजपा जीत रही तो जीतेगी, right? कोई दूसरा कांग्रेस जीतेगी. उनको भी पता है आसपास में क्या चीज हो रही है. तो we need to respect the intelligence of the voter. Yes, it generates conversation. It might affect few votes, but this is part of the game, right? Indian voter is so intelligent that in Odisha, when the elections happen simultaneously, they end up voting Naveen Patnaik with 2/3 majority in an assembly, but in Lok Sabha they give Modi a 9 or 10 seats. So I don't think they influence voting outcome to such an extent that they will change the baseline. but yes, they really generate lot of conversation for sure, and they impact at times and time and again for sure.
Yeah, even if they impact, I think my whole issue with the whole thing is it's not statistically significant, right? Because even if a few people are impacted, it may not be statistically significant in the eyes of the
माहौल
pollster.
बनाने का काम कर सकते हैं कई places पे.
Yeah, yeah, it might be a good talking point. For example, like we had brought up earlier on, right? Hillary Clinton, every single opinion poll had said Hillary Clinton will win, but still it did not affect the voter, and people went out and voted for Donald Trump, right?
Exactly. So see,
Yeah.
I am of this thing, Kushal, that I am very clear that कम poll निकालो पर सही निकालो. So for example, this time I had good data points in Punjab. So every 4 weeks I was coming up with a poll on Punjab, and it was giving me the same trend. It was just shifting in terms of the quantity of seats, but it was not changing my trend. So I am of this opinion कि भाई पोल तभी निकालो जब पता है कि उस वक्त की स्थिति को पॉपुलरली रिफ्लेक्ट कर सकते हो, और बेसलाइन गलत नहीं होना चाहिए. और अगर आपका पोल के एक पोल से दूसरे पोल में सीसॉ शिफ्ट हो गया, तो जनता को बता दो पहले ये चीजें हो रही थी, अब ये चीजें नहीं हो रही है, इसीलिए चेंज हुआ है. तो जनता के पास वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, वो चीज नहीं करती.
ओके, ये बड़ा विचित्र सा क्वेश्चन है. किसी ने पूछा है कि अगर वन नेशन वन पोल बिकम्स अ रियलिटी, हाउ मच ऑफ एन इफेक्ट इट विल हैव ऑन सेफोलॉजिस्ट्स एंड देयर करियर्स?
See, Kushal, I am a media professional and journalist, so along with being a psephologist, so it personally, whatever I will answer, people will think there is an element of selfishness in it, but I will give you what I have experienced on the ground. Principally, it's a great idea. But see, election is only one time in the entire Indian democracy when the neta or the bureaucrat हाथ जोड़ के खड़ा होता है जनता के सामने, and the janta has an ability to punish or reward the politician, right? और एक फेक नैरेटिव को बस्ट करने का वो एक जरिया होता है. मैं आपको सिंपल एग्जांपल देता हूं. अगर मान लो यूपी 2022 का चुनाव नहीं होता, तो आप 22 से 24 तक ये समझते हैं कि अखिलेश यादव से बड़ा कोई लीडर नहीं है, उससे महत्वाकांक्षी कोई लीडर नहीं है, यही है वही है, मीडिया को भी पंपिंग होती क्या होती, पर जमीनी रियलिटी नहीं थी, राइट? सो आई फील दैट यू शुड लुक एट हैविंग ईयरली पोल्स फॉर श्योर. आई एम नॉट इन द फेवर ऑफ ओनली हैविंग एन इलेक्शन वंस इन 5 years, बिकॉज अभी ऑलरेडी जो बाबू या ब्यूरोक्रेट होता है वो जनता का काम ढंग से नहीं करता है, क्योंकि उसके पास इंसेंटिव नहीं, ज्यादा उसका ट्रांसफर होगा. पर नेता को पता है कि अगर मैं काम नहीं करूंगा तो कोई भी दूसरे इलेक्शन के अंदर मेरे को जनता सबक सिखाएगी. सो दे आर ऑलवेज 24/7 ऑन फायर. एंड अपार्ट फ्रॉम इलेक्शन देयर इज नो टाइम. Everybody is not a Modi who is a servant of the people and who really cares for the people, right? I am talking about, these are scenarios like Modi have happened in this country after 40-45 years. No, it's not that every day हुआ है. So you need to look कि कल को मान लीजिए स्थिति कोई कोलिशन की हो गई तो आप कैसे उसको करोगे. सो मेरा मानना यह है कि जनता को हमेशा नेता को जनता का सेवक होना चाहिए, और जनता के पास अपॉर्चुनिटीज होती रहनी चाहिए कि वो जनता नेता उसके सामने झुके और उसका काम करे. मतलब क्या होगा, 5 साल चुनाव है, 4 साल तो कई लोग होंगे जो बोलेंगे 3.5 साल देके आखिरी 1 साल में उठा के काम कर देंगे. 3 साल मान लो कोई बाबू जनता को प्रताड़ित करेगा, तो उसका इंसेंटिव क्या है ना, नेता के पास भी इंसेंटिव क्या है कि यार कल को दूसरे अगर ये बाबू ने ज्यादा कुछ घमंडाई हरकतें करी या कुछ भी करी तो उसको ये हमको चुनाव में दिक्कत क्रिएट कर देगा, तो उसको हटा दो. सो एक इम्प्लिसिट चेक एंड बैलेंस रहता है. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट अकॉर्डिंग टू मी, if you ask me on the conceptual part of it, because I have seen that voters really get the power when there is an election. It's nothing more than it, and it is extremely needed. And then it creates, और वो क्या होता है, वेंट भी निकलता है. अगर आप वेंट, कई बार जनता वेंट भी निकाल देती है अच्छाई या बुराई वाली चीज. सो एंड इट रियली बस्ट अ लॉट ऑफ फेक नैरेटिव. अदरवाइज फेक नैरेटिव मीडिया के अंदर अक्रॉस द चीज. अगर मान लो मोदी, अगर ये इलेक्शंस बीच में नहीं होते, लेट्स से बिहार, आई विल गिव यू एन एग्जांपल, बिहार के चुनाव के बाद, अगर बिहार के चुनाव के बाद सबने बोला खत्म चीज, अगर यूपी नहीं होता तो वो नैरेटिव बैलेंस कैसे होता, राइट? So it is very, very important according to me, if you feel that, I personally feel that periodic elections should take place so that people get the power, because already bureaucracy is a rugged, it's a system जिसके अंदर पूरी जंग खा चुकी है. उसको prime minister is improved by getting professionals, creating system where incentive based on performance will happen. But जनता can only have hope from a neta. They cannot have hope. Just say Maharashtra. Now, if a BMC elections happen, the results of that will really impact the narrative in the Maharashtra, right? It will really impact. तो अगर पहले से वो खत्म होकर सिर्फ 24 के बाद में होगा तो फिर 4 साल तक तो सरकार कुछ भी कर सकती है, और सरकार के पास इतने तंत्र होते हैं कि वो चीजों को इस हिसाब से कर सकती है कि आखिरी मतलब बहुत तरह से चीजों को मैनेज किया जा सकता है। तो आई वुड गो की जनता के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से जनता को पावर पीरियोडिकली देती रहनी चाहिए।
या सो आई अंडरस्टैंड, बेसिकली आप कह रहे हो कि बहुत हाई स्टेक्स हो जाते हैं फिर वो एक इलेक्शन पे, और वो डेमोक्रेसी के लिए ओवरऑल अच्छा नहीं होगा. आई काइंड ऑफ गेट वेयर यू आर कमिंग फ्रॉम.
And
आई
then
आई डू
also,
गेट.
I'll tell you what, at every place, then India needs to decide that whether India wants to move towards, see, India is now, even though India is a parliamentary democracy for sure, but faces are becoming more important, right? So, because you are in an era of social media where faces matter, it is not de facto presidential, but de jure faces are becoming very important. So, you are not a presidential democracy per se, is what I feel. Let's imagine a situation that I'll give you an example of Jharkhand, let's say, ठीक है? अब झारखंड के अंदर हेमंत सोरेन गवर्नमेंट वाज इलेक्टेड. Now there are so many cases of corruption which have come up. Now these people also know कि भाई एक इलेक्शन आएगा, ये चीज आएगा, उसके अंदर ये रेकअप होगा, तो ऑपोजिशन को भी पता चल जाएगा कि कितना फ्यूल ऑफ फायर मिलता है. That is how these people are kept in check. It's very, very important. I am not talking about the well-intentioned leader, right? I am telling you about a scenario where the leader is not intentioned, because you prepare your democracy for an average or a worst case scenario. You don't prepare your democracy thinking always a best case scenario will arrive. So this is very, very important. I personally feel. So मैं इसमें एक firm opinion रखता हूँ. I am for periodic elections, but not one election only in 5 years.
So one last question before I let you go. This viewer has asked, in your experience of conducting so many not only election result oriented polls but mood of the nation polls, etc., etc., how does an average voter view, let's say, capitalism versus socialism versus the freebies model, which nowadays Aam Aadmi Party does, and what is your experience in general on the overall understanding of economics itself of the Indian voter? This will be my last question to you.
See, the Indian voter ka basic cheese is there, depends on, right now you are moving towards being a middle income country, right? So पहली चीज तो ये है कि जनता सबसे चीज चाहती है कि यार मेरी डे टू डे जिंदगी के अंदर सहूलियत बेहतर हो. कहने का ये मतलब है कि अगर मेरे को अच्छी शिक्षा नहीं मिली तो अच्छी शिक्षा मिले. अगर मान लीजिए कि पहले मेरा खर्चा ज्यादा बढ़ रहा था तो हो, अगर मेरी सड़क नहीं बनी थी तो सड़क बने. मतलब मेरे को पहले कम, अगर मान लीजिए कि एक्स अमाउंट ऑफ पैसा मेरे को कम पहले मिल रहा था, अगर मेरे अकाउंट में ज्यादा पैसा आ रहा है, मतलब मुझे सहूलियत चाहिए. सो डे टू डे की जो बेसिक जरूरतें हैं, there the person expects from the government, whichever government is there, not on the economics of it, ki I should get the benefit. So you call it benefit, freebies, other things. Person wants ki bhai mera day to day living ki jo cheez hai wo behtar ho. That is extremely very important. Let's say on the free electricity part, right? So what was the genesis of that free electricity? Because during the time of Congress, a lot of people in Delhi, despite Sheila Dikshit doing fantastic work on infrastructure, right? But then after a point, the high electricity prices became a very big issue. And so there was a vacuum, and that is why the narrative of free came. So that will also be terminal, right? Every narrative is a terminal. But जनता चाहती है कि उसकी बेसिक जरूरतें जो है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंटली फिल होनी चाहिए. तो ऐसा जनता ये नहीं सोचती कि भैया कैपिटलिस्ट या वो, जनता मानती कि भाई बेसिक मेरी जरूरतें डे टू डे वो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है. दूसरी चीज ये है कि जब किसी का हक छीना जाता है, सो विच मीन्स टू से, सपोज कि कोई इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट आ गया और उस इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट ने मान लीजिए कहीं पे फैक्ट्री सेटअप कर दी, जनता को उससे कोई दिक्कत नहीं है जब उसके वहां पे नौकरियां सेटअप हो रही है, चीजें हो रही है. बट कल को मान लीजिए कि वहीं के लोगों को उसने स्टेक होल्डर नहीं बनाया और फिर पूरी चीजें, देयर इज नो वॉइस व्हिच इज गिवन टू देम. So that becomes another issue which is there. So they are not per se anti-capitalist or pro-socialist. Janta does not understand that. Janta understands welfare. कि भैया मेरे लिए क्या है, नेता को मैंने इलेक्ट किया, मेरे लिए इसने क्या किया, पहली चीज. दूसरी चीज, देश के खिलाफ कुछ नहीं करना चाहिए. So traditionally a person is nationalist. तो अगर मान लो आपने मेरे को कुछ भी नहीं दिया, पर अगर आप देश को आगे लेके जा रहे हो, अगर आप देश को आगे बढ़ते हुए दिखा रहे हो, उसका मान सम्मान बढ़ रहा है, उसकी इज्जत बढ़ रही है, तो वो एक ओवरलिंग नैरेटिव होगा। तीसरी चीज, उसका धर्म अब जो है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंटली सुपीरियर हो गया। पहले क्या होता था प्री 2000 पर्टिकुलरली 12-13 के उसमें, कि हिंदूज वर अ डिवाइडेड सेक्ट। अब जो है एक हिंदू आइडेंटिटी इज बिकम मोर इंपॉर्टेंट, व्हिच मींस दैट हिंदूज पर्टिकुलरली व्हेन आई ट्रैवल, they don't want appeasement, they don't want special treatment, but they want equality. So that is why this narrative, they say ki bhaiya, if you can practice your dharma, why can't we practice our dharma? So nobody now, politician can be anti-Hindu explicitly and think of ruling this country or winning this country. That is gone as a narrative. 90s was the era of dividing Hindus in caste and consolidating the Muslims. Now it cannot happen. That's why in places where 30% minorities also there, still people are not able to win. BJP winning Assam, winning Meerut, many seats is a testament of that. So you can't be anti-Hindu. Hindus don't want, appeasement special, but they want care. We should have the ability to practice our dharma properly, and we want equality. So this is where that is the number 3 part which I feel. So 8 is welfareism, B it is nationalism, and 3 it is dharma. These 3 things are constants which play a very important thing. And if the people think here politician ने 10 promises किए हैं, वो 10 में से 10 नहीं कर पाए, 5 भी कर पाए, पर उसकी नीयत सही है, तो तब भी वो जाके उसको वोट कर देंगे. So intention of the person is also, or the politician is also as important as his will to deliver everything, right? So it's, people also understand you can't deliver me all, but the person should know that he is working towards delivering me. So वो चीज देखो, एक कॉमन आदमी क्या है देश में, वो मेहनत करता है 24 घंटे, 2 वक्त की रोटी खाता है, चाहता है उसका परिवार अच्छा रहे और देश के प्रति उसका प्यार है. और अब एक हिंदू धर्म के प्रति भी उसकी एक मतलब एक अंदर एक गर्व की बात आ चुकी है. सो वही चीज ये नेता से भी एक्सपेक्ट करता है. तो कोई नेता अगर पार्ट टाइम होगा तो उसकी इज्जत नहीं करेगा, कोई 24 घंटे मेहनत कर रहा होगा वो उसकी इज्जत करेगा, तो उसकी नियत होगी. तो these are things which are very important. Muslims in India and minorities in India are going through a very big inflection, Kushal, just to add to it. I foresee 2 things might happen. Because Muslims and minorities in India, particularly Muslims in India, were all being given special treatment in the past, and they were used to special treatment. Now there is equal treatment taking place, and places there is no appeasement which is taking place. So the political parties which had kept their politics on special treatment and consolidation of Muslims, those parties are facing an existential crisis. In this scenario, either the Muslim will become more radical and come on the streets, which you see at places, because they are seeing that they used to have a political veto on Indian politics. Now that political veto has gone, that is a very, very big change. That first it used to be by 30% we will decide everything. Now it is not the scenario. In Bengal, it was a political veto. It is a political veto in Bengal at many places. In Kerala, it is a political veto, but largely nationally, with God's grace, there is no political veto. So now, when there is no political veto, either they will go towards going on the streets, like you see कि भैया वोटर किसको जिताना है हराना है वो हम तुम निर्धारित नहीं कर सकते, तो चलो सड़कों से अपने हक को मांगो, right? Or there will be a division in this class where some people will say, boss, there is equal treatment. I am getting benefits of the government scheme like you or other person is getting. So you will see a division in that. It's a very interesting trend, which is which will happen, which way this politics will go in the near future. Because remember, Jinnah was also an intellectual. Jinnah also was a well-learned man, but Jinnah got people on streets on this basic thing. So India has to be very careful of which way will this go, because we have removed the political veto of a religion or of certain people from the religion. Now that's why you are seeing so many of them on streets, like because they have not been able to digest going off this special treatment. The Indian democracy is at a very, very interesting phase where which way this will go, and that's why it's which way this will go will also become very, very interesting. So all this Shaheen Bags, all this CA, all this Muslim under threats, all this is a part of a plan, but it is all part of the plan to get street protests, because they can't now decide. They've lost the political veto. That's what I can say. This is This is one very big trend which has shifted of loss of political will.
Interesting. Well, I guess we have to watch how the trend lines follow in the future. Pradeep, it was a lot of fun talking to you. I always wanted to understand the technicalities of this entire process of psephology itself. So I'm really glad that you took your time out of your schedule and came here and answered all the viewers' questions also. So I wish you all the best, and once again, thank you very much for coming and
Thank
chatting
you
with
so
us.
much. Thank you, Kushal, and wish you all the best for the podcast to come. Hope to speak to you again, and great to speak to you. Thank you. Namaskar.
All right, guys, we'll wrap today's discussion up. Once again, in the description of the podcast, you will find the details for Pradeep. You can, follow him on Twitter. You can also go on his website. I've left the link of the website Jan Ki Baat in the description of the podcast itself. I will request all of you to support the Cārvāka podcast by subscribing to the channel, whether it's on YouTube or on Spotify, iTunes. You know the drill. You can also become a member on YouTube, Patreon, buy the merch, or send your donations to UPI. I'll see you guys next time with another interesting discussion. Until then, namaste, take care, bye bye.